Come on. Come on now, let's show it. Yes. Yes, indeed. Hey, folks, remember back when you were a kid and you used to watch those old Walt Disney movies? You know, movies like The Love Bug, Old Yeller, Freaky Friday, The Apple Dumpling Gang. You know, and they always have that crazy promo that they love, they would always do before every movie when you bought it on like VHS or so. Well, I figured I'd give you guys a little special treat because obviously this is episode number 11 of Krocking, Locking and Dropping with your host, Kenneth, the K-Rock Cline. And folks, I think it's fair to say that I never would have envisioned me doing 11 podcasts or episodes of this podcast, but I'm glad that we are ready to start and moving forward with our next episode. And, you know, I want to do something a little different this time. I want to stick away from sports, keep away from sports this time. Okay, well, maybe sports will still be around, but not in the way that you would like to think about it. Because today, I want to talk about, my weekend and how I went to, I didn't necessarily visit or spend a weekend in Houston. I just went down to, spend a day kind of looking around to, the city after they got hit by that tornado on Thursday. And I just kind of wanted to get my, thoughts and emotions about what I saw from, the aftermath of it 2 days prior. I wanted to go on Friday, but there was actually some things I needed to take care of in the office, so I ended up not going on Friday, but I did end up going on Saturday, and I'm going to give y'all my thoughts and emotions and why I think about that moment as a comparison to a childhood episode I used to watch, like an episode on TV I watched growing up as a kid. And then my other thing I want to talk about this movie that I saw. It is a sports movie, and I want to talk about the promo. I want to talk about, what I saw as far as the movie. Did I like it? What would I rate it as far as being among the greatest sports movies of all time? And would I definitely recommend it? This was a movie that came out a year or so ago, but I just figured I'd watch it for the first time, and I'll give you my thoughts on all of that. So today I'm going to be an emotional person, and I'm going to be a movie critic. So that is something that you might not normally hear from me, but that is what I'm going to do for this occasion. And as always, remember, this podcast, Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock, will be on my YouTube channel at KW Cline, CLINE 91, and of course it'll also be on Spotify and Podbean. So, therefore, this will be the episode number 11 of my podcast, Krocking, Locking, and Dropping, and of course, and again, my YouTube channel and on Spotify. So, with that in mind, let's take a little bit of a break, but when we come back, we will be talking about what I witnessed or what I experienced on Saturday when I went down to Houston. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. So, on the last episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping, I talked about a situation where I had an early release from work because of the severe weather that was supposed to hit Beaumont, Texas. That was on Monday, and I remember, just kind of feeling a little bit bad and upset, disappointed, even though nothing happened in Beaumont that particular day as far as the weather. It just seemed to pass right over because I ended up taking a nap. I was kind of disappointed and upset that it didn't really happen, and I sort of, felt like I wasted my day or wasted the rest of my day at work by not being there just because of the severe weather and everything. Little did I know that on Thursday there was going to be another situation like this, and I ended up getting an early release message from work at 4 p.m., or that I had to leave by 4 p.m., so, all right, I know what to do now. I get in my car earlier, and I take off for home and just prepare for the worst. And once again, it felt like Beaumont didn't quite get in any of that stuff. We had some severe rains, we had some damaging winds, I know there were trees that were knocked down, but other than that, I didn't think it got any sort of significant damage from where I was. But that didn't necessarily mean that I was feeling happy about it, because I found out earlier that my hometown of Houston was hit by a strong event, which they are now calling a Derecho. And I want to say I heard about that term before, but I never really knew what it was, because you think about your natural disasters. You think about hurricanes, you think of tornadoes, you think of earthquakes or avalanches, depending on where you live. Obviously, there's major flooding in the area. But, I just think that the city of Houston, actually got hit by what was known as a derecho. And unfortunately, as of this podcast, there were still a number of people without some power. There were 4 people that unfortunately passed away in that situation, and it just makes you so upset and sad. So, but I wanted to check to see what a derecho was, and I'm looking up a CNN article that was done from last year. What is a derecho? Well, a derecho is a significant, potentially destructive weather event that is characterized as having widespread, long-lived, straight-line winds associated with a fast-moving group of severe thunderstorms. While there is no official or universal definition for a derecho, it is classified by a swath of wind damage extending more than 400 miles with wind gusts of 58 miles per hour or greater along most of its length, according to the Storm Prediction Center. Now, I sometimes wonder, if there was any sort of, similarities between a derecho and a tornado. And continuing to read here, their destruction can be similar to that of tornadoes, but it is significantly in one direction, along a fairly straight path, the Weather Service says, hence its name, which is Spanish for straight ahead. Derecho damage is frequently referred to as straight line wind damage. So, kind of, it's like somewhat similar, except that with tornadoes, they can go in any direction. They can go in one direction, or they can go in multiple directions, whereas this is just a straight line kind of event. So it does seem like that there was a significant amount of damage, and obviously they're one of the costliest severe storms. Continuing to read here, winds within the derecho can be as strong as a tornado, knocking out trees, power lines, mobile homes, barns, and other similar structures. They are the most dangerous to those outdoors, whether in rural or urban area. However, cities are particularly vulnerable to these high winds due to damage to electrical and communication lines, falling trees, and damage to buildings. So, obviously, I went to Houston on Saturday to see the extent of the damage, and I tried to be respectful to all the workers that were there trying to fix up the area, clean up the streets with the debris. And I did see some glass debris in downtown Houston, and looking up at the buildings and just seeing a number of windows that were either blown out or boarded up with wood, it was really shocking to me. Now, I know that cities can get hit with storms. Don't get me wrong. It can happen anywhere. I know that there are cities like Dallas or Los Angeles or San Francisco or, anywhere else. Atlanta, for that matter. I know Atlanta's had a few of these come by. One time in 2008, I remember a Southeastern Conference tournament game. I want to say it was between Mississippi State and Alabama. But there was a tornado that actually struck through the area unexpectedly, and fortunately there weren't even any fatalities. Most of the people were inside the building, the Georgia Dome, which was hosting the SEC basketball tournament, and thanks to one shot that would extend the game into overtime, it saved a lot of lives. And so, if it hadn't been for that one shot to go into overtime, who knows what would have happened and the fans out there. But the weather, it was just pretty bad. But yet, this is a very touchy subject for me, because as someone that is from Houston, that loves the city, that will take it, that would prefer to live in Houston, and we'll say that Houston is better than any other city. And I get it. Don't get me wrong. There are some flaws to it. Every city has flaws. Our traffic's bad. We flood. We're hot and humid and everything. And it's if you can handle it, you can handle it. But if you can't, then I understand. It's not for everyone. And I think it's one of those places where you kind of have to come down to experience it, so that way you can decide for yourself whether you like it or not. But hopefully you have an appreciation. But as I say this right now, the city was without power, and it really was. It's a lot of damage, and you see in all the videos. Like, you see the video of how people were driving in the storm, and then all of a sudden it just came like out of nowhere. And that kind of got me to thinking, like, okay, when it comes to weather predictions, we can prepare for a hurricane when there's reports 3 to 5 days out. Like, it's easy to prepare for a hurricane. 3 to 5 days, there's going to be a hurricane coming in this area. You got time to prepare. So you got to board up your walls. You got to get some food and drinks and everything. And if you decide to evacuate, you get to evacuate like that day or the next day, just before the hurricane comes in. And I've been on both sides of the spectrum. We had a hurricane, or we were supposed to have a hurricane come in 2005, a couple of months after Hurricane Katrina, believe it or not. But we were supposed to have a Hurricane Rita come in, and I don't think it did as much damage. But we evacuated, and we went to my grandparents' place. So fortunately, nothing happened there. But then 3 years later, Hurricane Ike came, and we decided to ride it out. And I still remember that whole process, because we were without power for at least a week. And my parents had to tell all three of us, my brother, sister, and myself, that we had to sleep downstairs, because if we went upstairs to our rooms, it would have just been warmer or hotter. So we had to go downstairs to sleep for that week. So, you're thinking about all this. So obviously you can prepare for a hurricane. You can also prepare for a tornado, but the thing is, you just don't know. Like, you have a general idea of where it's going to be. Like, you could say, okay, when it possibly comes, when we're under a watch or a warning, we have to be prepared. Okay, we need to go into a shelter. We need to find the lowest possible spot we can have, or get away from a room that has glass and go into a closet, or go to a bathroom. Or if you have a tornado shelter, well, that's easy. You go down there. And that's obviously been some options here. But the thing is, it's possibly coming. You just don't know how much of significant damage it's going to be like. And I don't think anybody would have expected this derecho to take place. You were prepared for a storm, but you just don't know how possible this event could happen. I mean, obviously we know how it happens, but it's one of those things that just kind of is unexpected to happen. Like, it almost feels like the same type of tornado, but it's really more associated with being like a damaging thunderstorm, and we've had our fair share of those. So I mean, obviously I'm trying to learn more about this as we go along, but I'm not really much of a weather expert, other than I knew it was pretty bad. And I got concerned. I got concerned for my friends and everybody that still lives there. I called them and checked to see if they were doing okay, and they said that they were, but they were without power. So again, I hope everything continues to go well as well. But really, the person that I was worried for the most was my dad. He got tickets, or he actually had a friend that went to an Astros game that particular day. And we used to go to Astros games all the time. We're season ticket holders. We're still fans. Deal with it for those of you that hate. But, my parents are not in the city anymore. They're sort of on the outskirts, so they rarely go to games. But my dad had a good opportunity with his employees to not only go to the game, but to sit in the club level seats. And I was surprised that they actually played the game, considering all that was happening outdoors. Yes, I know Minute Maid Park has a retractable roof and everything, so I wasn't too worried there. But it did kind of surprise me, because I did see a video of them, or how there was like some rain showers that was falling in through the stadium and everything. So, it just makes you, surprised, and you're glad that he's okay, and you're glad that everyone in there was all right. and a big credit to the security in that ballpark for getting all the fans in there safe and sound, so that way they could enjoy the game. And fortunately, the Stros won that night as well. But yeah, you're just sitting there, you're thinking about the emotions that you're going through. Like, okay, I know that we've been hit with floods. I know that we've been hit with hurricanes, with Hurricane Harvey being the most recent one. And yes, we had the big freeze a couple of years ago. I mean, every place has some natural disasters. They're vulnerable to them. That's just the way it is of the world. But it kind of makes you sad how this event, while it was like 25 years ago since something like this happened, I want to say, but you're sad that there were at least a few people that perished in the storms, but you're just glad that for the most part, I mean, yeah, there's people without power, but it wasn't as significantly worse. But it still kind of hurts you because that's your hometown. I live in Beaumont, Texas right now, but I don't consider myself a Beaumont person. I used to live in Marshall. I used to spend time in San Antonio, down in Fort Myers, but I never said, hey, I'm from San Antonio, or I'm from Fort Myers, or I'm from Beaumont. I'm always going to put Houston as my hometown. And yes, I did live overseas in India and Singapore for a couple of months or almost a year. That's a podcast for another day, but I'm always going to say Houston is my home. That's just the way I am. I'm a Houstonian. I don't care where I live. I'm not going to declare the city that I live in as my hometown. I am a Houstonian. That's just, it's not that I got anything against these other cities. It's just the way I am. But I know it's got flaws. I know that we've had to overcome our fair share of disasters, but we're resilient people. I think most people don't seem to realize that. And it really hurts me, and it just touches me when you go through something as bad as that. So, but when I was driving in Houston and I'm trying to get through the crowded streets where as bad as traffic is, it's even worse when all the stoplights are out or they're not working, and you're driving through the streets, and I was just thinking about this because how much it hurt me. And for whatever reason, I used to think about an episode, or I thought of an episode of a kids' TV show I used to watch. I will admit, I talked about this on my other podcast, but I was and kind of still am a big Thomas the Tank Engine fan. Now, I'm not a diehard fanatic like I might have been as a kid, but I used to love watching Thomas, or the Thomas the Tank Engine series and all the stories. The action model ones, not the animated models, or what I mean. But the stories with George Carlin, the famous comedian who used to tell the stories, and then the Shining Time Station episodes and all that. But I was thinking about this one episode that I watched. The name of the story is called Henry's Forest. And in this story, Henry is a big green engine who is a strong green engine. He's a goods engine mostly, but he can pull the express from time to time. However, he's a strong goods engine who is best known for being an engine attached to a train who was afraid of a few drops of rain. He went into a tunnel, blew smoke through his funnel, and wouldn't come out again. And because of that, he refused to come out of the tunnel because of the rain, and he would end up being shut up in a tunnel, which that's kind of a scary episode. Fortunately, he was later released and needed some help. But anyway, the episode that I was thinking of was called Henry's Forest. And in this episode, Henry has a place that he likes to go to more than anyone else, and it's the forest. It's basically peaceful. There's a lot of trees. There's animals. It's just that calm atmosphere that he likes to go to after maybe a hard day's work. Well, one night, a massive storm hits, and all the engines were impressed with the wind, the sound of it, and just the strength of how everything was going on outside of them. But Henry is sitting there worried that the forest is going to get hit. And the next morning, obviously, the storm went away, but the damage to the forest was very significant. And obviously, Henry was very hurt by it because all the trees and, it didn't feel like that forest anymore. And so, so Henry was able to help out take all the damaged logs and take them to the timber mill where they were going to be turned into like furniture and other things, which to Henry, it was good for him just to know that they were going to be put to good use, but he was still very upset that the forest was pretty damaged. And obviously there were, other engines were very concerned for him and how he felt. And then, of course, Sir Topham Hatt, the man who ran the railway, who was also known as the Fat Controller, got to get Toby, another engine, to help deliver some trees to the forest and rebuild. And that was the whole thing about rebuilding. And next thing you know, the forest is able to get back to what it once was. And Henry, of course, is happy again. And I think we all kind of have that moment where we might feel like we're very upset and sad over this event, a tragedy that has happened in a city, even if there are worse things in the world, but something like this that really hurts us to a place that we really love. But one thing we know for sure is that when we get knocked down, we get back up. And I know the city is going to rebuild itself, and it's going to be prepared. But certainly, I think this is the kind of event, even though everybody prepares for different types of weathers. You have all these storm chasers that are trying to learn more about tornadoes every single day, or with derechos. I think the derecho is probably going to be taken as seriously as a tornado over the future, because we're trying to learn more about the weather as we go along in the world, and that is something that I hope and pray will be able to keep us safe from the weather and keep us better prepared for weather events like this. And certainly every city can happen to anywhere. It's just unfortunate that it happened in my area, but the fact that we've had a lot of crazy weather. I mean, yes, every year weather around this time can be brutal and unpredictable, but I just think it's so crazy how we're seeing a lot more of these storms nowadays. And hopefully, we won't have any significant damage to the city of Houston or anywhere else for some time. And again, I know a lot of rural communities are still vulnerable to that, especially the ones in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. But I think we all have a common purpose in that, regardless of where it hits, we should be prepared. We should stay safe. We should listen to guidelines of how to deal with these massive weather events. And we should all be praying, if we do believe in God, just praying that He keeps us safe in all the storms and help others, and just continue to live our lives. And if we do get hit with some damage, then you know what? Dust yourself off and get back to rebuilding it and making it what it once was, or if not better. So that's the way I look at this whole situation. So very touching few days for me. But I'm glad everything. I know the city will be better, and I'm glad every one of my friends and family members were okay. And I do again want to extend my thoughts and prayers to those that were lost in the storm as well. So. With that out of the way, when we come back, I'm going to bring it back to a little bit of a lighter note. I'm going to be talking about a sports movie that I watched over the weekend and give my thoughts on it. Stay tuned. Now it's time for the very first appearance of everyone's favorite movie critic, Kenneth the K-Rock Cline. Hello, I'm Kenneth the K-Rock Cline, movie critic extraordinaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing a movie that I saw over the past weekend, a sports movie that's probably considered one of the most underrated films, although with time it might be granted higher up in terms of the status as a sports movie. Therefore, I want to talk about the movie that I saw called Next Goal Wins. Yes, the soccer movie, Next Goal Wins. Now, this movie is based on a true story about Dutch-American football or soccer coach Thomas Rongen, during his time as the, I guess you call it, manager of the American Samoa team in 2011. Now, American Samoa is an island on the Pacific or around the Pacific Ocean. However, in the early days, they were considered the worst football team or soccer team, since this is America, obviously. And I have to kind of be respectful for all those that might be listening in from other part of the countries that don't consider soccer. They could call it football, if you will. But anyway, they had the worst football team in all the world, and they had suffered some bad losses. One of those losses was actually an embarrassing 31-0 defeat at the hands of Australia, which, I mean, it's a little bit unfair considering Australia is just a tad above shoulders better than them. But that record has since been topped, I just recently checked, by Vanuatu, who outscored their opponent 46-0. So much for sportsmanship there. But anyway, the American Samoa team had a terrible reputation when it came to football. And in a way, this is kind of a sports comedy movie where they kind of throw in some humoristic details, just to kind of make it very entertaining. I don't know if necessarily the journey to... I think they wanted to make it more entertaining, if you will, to talk about this story, which is really a remarkable underdog type story about this team that once upon a time was considered the worst in football to come across as a team with an opportunity to qualify for the 2014 World Cup. Yes, the 2014 World Cup, which was held in Brazil. So we're talking about possibly seeing the American Samoa squad in the World Cup that year, along with the Argentinas, the Germanys, the Englands, the United States, all those great countries. I mean, the American Samoa squad in the World Cup seems a bit far-fetched, but this is their story about how they had an opportunity to try to get themselves to qualify for the World Cup, and that required winning their qualification tournament. But before they have to do that, or focus on trying to do that, they first need to get a goal. And obviously, this is a team that hadn't been able to score some goals, henceforth all the losses, if you will. So they bring in this coach named Thomas Rongen, who was played by Michael Fassbender, who is a West German actor, and he has been in a couple of X-Men movies. He also was in the Alien Covenant movie back in 2017. And yeah, I mean, he also made his first, he was actually in the Band of Brothers, and also was in the movie The 300, along with, oh crap, I keep forgetting the guy's name. Gerard Butler. Yes, Gerard Butler, that's who I was thinking of. So, yeah, but Michael Fassbender is in this movie, and, he's brought in to coach the team because he used to be the manager of the United States under-20 squad. So he wasn't the head coach of the men's national team. He was part of their squad, but he was on the head coach of the United States under-20 squad, and wasn't really having a good time there. So he finally gets an opportunity. Actually, he got fired from that job after they failed to qualify for the under-20 World Cup. So he ended up being the coach, getting hired as the coach of the American Samoa team, which is one of the worst teams out there. And so, there's a bit of a culture shock for him that he has to learn. For one example of that is at certain moments when you hear a bell ring, all of them stop what they do and they pray. And then, of course, he trains them to be really competitive. Like, he trains them in a way that they had never been trained before. And it's one of those incredible stories. And I'll tell you what's really interesting about this story. The story also includes the American Samoa team actually had a transgender player. Now, they call it a fa'afafine, which, according to the definition I'm getting here, it's translated as in the manner of a woman. And these are NATO males who align with a third gender or a gender role in the Samoans. So it's kind of like a transgender kind of thing. But there was a player that was transgender, originally born a male, but had since transitioned into a female. The player's name was Jaya Sayayua. I think I might have butchered that name. If I did, I apologize. But this is a real interesting story. The actor, or I guess you could say actress, was actually a transgender person. So clearly they were able to get lucky in finding someone to not only play this transgender player, but also find a transgender person on the American Samoa squad. But yeah, so this did involve a Fa'afine player who was actually the first transgender player ever to compete in a World Cup qualifier game. So, yeah, but basically the movie, it's kind of one of those sports movies, like when you watch it, you think, it's hard to really look at it as a comedic sports movie, if you will. I mean, there are some humorous times, but this is kind of like one of those movies where, yeah, they take this underdog country and put them in a situation where they have an opportunity to be considered among the best. Like, it's a small country. It's a tropical country, but, you know, they're not well known for their soccer team at that time. And they have an opportunity to compete in, without question, the biggest sporting event in the world, the World Cup. So that was something that they strived for in this movie. And, you know, if you want to talk about other notable actors in this movie, you had Will Arnett is in this movie. He plays an executive for the United States soccer team. And one of the storylines of this movie was when Coach Rongen was dealing with some personal struggles. He had been fired from his position, and we don't really know. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was, you know, they keep repeating, playing these text messages or voicemails from his daughter, who, I don't want to give away the spoilers here, but just kind of understanding, and makes you think that, oh, he has a bad relationship with his daughter, and he, I think, had a previous love interest in the movie, but that didn't quite work out, as I think she was now possibly dating one of the executives for the United States Soccer Federation. And so, really, this is kind of one of those soul-searching movies, if you are a fan of that. Not only for the coach, but also for the players who don't want to be considered the worst team in the world. And, you know, they've made some strides since then. I don't want to give away the ending to the movie, but they have completely made some strides since then. And right now, if you were to look up the FIFA rankings as far as which team is considered the worst, that is San Marino, who is currently 210 overall. So San Marino is currently the worst team in all of soccer. And looking up here, I see the American Samoa. They're currently 189th in the country. So in the FIFA rankings, obviously Argentina and France, the World Cup participants in 2022, are the top two respectively. But right now, it's 188 spots below. It's the American Samoa. So that just kind of shows you the progress that country has made. So, with that being said, what do I think about the movie? Well, I liked how they took probably one of the most underrated sports stories in the world, and this was actually based on a documentary that they did in 2014, which I thought was really interesting. And I really liked that they took this underdog country, a true story, and they made it into a situation where they have an opportunity. Their real focus was trying to score a goal, and that was constantly repeated over and over again. But I liked how they talked about this story and how they were able to help with the coach, trying to get him to find his place, and certainly trying to figure out a way how to help this team score a goal and improve themselves as a squad. And then, of course, there are obviously some other issues, mainly with the whole transgender thing that was part of the storyline. And I'm trying not to be, you know, political here. I mean, obviously, I respect everyone's opinions on the matter, and, you know, but the fact that was a kind of a storyline, how he was trying to get accustomed to that, and then just kind of him having to deal with a past love interest and also the relationship with his daughter. And this was kind of an interesting movie. I didn't really. I think there were some parts of the story or some parts of the movie that what I didn't like was they kind of they kind of took some plot lines, some very important plot lines, and they sort of applied it into moments where you didn't really need to do it in that way. Like, instead of just showing highlights of a match, they basically had someone talking about it right in front of their parents in that specific moment. Like, don't like narrate it. Like, don't have a person narrate it. Just let the whole match play itself out. Because I think that kind of takes away the purpose of the suspense of this particular soccer match or any of the tournament games that they played in as well. And so I think that was something that I didn't really like. And then I think some of the jokes were kind of corny in a way, but I feel like nowadays with movies they try so hard to make it as, corny with all this entertainment, like forced humor, but it's really hard to be funny, especially in society nowadays where there might be some political cultures, or not political culture, political correctness that kind of holds back on some of the humor that might have been funny and laughable years ago, but nowadays it's kind of hard to be as funny without offending anybody. But yeah, I just think, there were some times where I think the humor was kind of forced. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were some moments that I laughed at and I really enjoyed it, but I think looking back on it, this is just a film that they could have done without the forced humor and some of the other things. But I think on a scale of, on a grading scale with A, B, C, or D, or E, or F, there's no E in grading. If there was an E, then I think everything would be more complicated in the education system. But as far as the grade of the movie, I would probably give it about a B minus. And the reason why I say that is because there were some plot lines to the story that were very emotional. They had a right balance of comedy, even though at times it was a forced humor. But there were also some moments where it was like you didn't really need to apply that in the movie as well. So I think it deserves at least a B minus. I think it tells a great story about an underdog team that tries to compete for glory in a major competition. Closest thing I can think of was Cool Runnings, the Jamaican bobsled team that competed in the 1988 Winter Olympics, and that was a movie starring the late John Candy, which I definitely enjoyed a lot. But I definitely think this is an okay movie. This is a good movie, like not a great movie. Like if you ask me where I would put it as far as the all-time soccer movies, where would I consider it to be? I would probably say maybe number 4 behind Escape to Victory, the Sylvester Stallone movie. I'd probably put it right behind Bend It Like Beckham. And I may be a little biased here because I grew up in the 90s, but I definitely would think The Big Green would be a little bit better than this particular movie. But yeah, I think all those movies, this is a very interesting movie. I think over time, it might be lost in the shuffle just because of where it stands out as far as the talk of the story and why the sport of soccer. Because I feel like soccer movies they're very popular around the world, but compared to here, it's really hard to say, because even though we have had moments where, from a patriotism perspective, they show up at soccer games or United States soccer games, whether it be men's or women's, it just doesn't have that same kind of flow of any type of sports movies, like with football movies or with boxing movies or basketball and baseball. Soccer is just kind of that sports movie that there hasn't really been a lot of soccer movies that were made. Some kids' movies, yes, but some real serious movies that we would consider to be sports classics, hardly any. And I think this is one of those movies that I think might fall short of that over time. I think it might generate a lot of publicity and a lot of pub. And now, this movie I say publicity, I mean like people that might be tuning in to watching this movie on Netflix, which is where I was able to find it, Netflix or Hulu. And, this movie came out in 2023, but it's now on Netflix. And I definitely think it is a good movie if you want to watch or if you need some inspiration. I wouldn't necessarily be very high hopes of that this movie will be a great movie. It may not be the best sports movie of your life, and I definitely think that sometimes soccer movies probably need to get a little bit more recognition, but I definitely like the concept of the story, and I definitely know it's a true story, and I think it definitely deserved to be told. It's just that at times I think it could have been better without the forced humor and without, some extra stuff. But again, that's just the way I look at it from a movie critic perspective. And folks, we are going to step aside. When we come back, I wrap up the show with my final thoughts. Stay tuned. Alright, so before I close the show and update as far as the NBA playoffs are concerned, we are down to our Final Four. In the Eastern Conference, it's the Boston Celtics against the Indiana Pacers. I was very surprised. I figured the Pacers were going to give the New York Knicks a tough match, but unfortunately the Knicks kind of laid a goose egg at home. They didn't quite show up, but to be fair, they didn't have any of their some of their key players. They were out due to injuries, and as a result, the Pacers were able to take care of business 130 to 109. They will be taking on the Boston Celtics, who I always felt were the best team in the Eastern Conference. And I think that's going to be a really good series. I think the Pacers are going to push Boston, but ultimately I think the Celtics will prevail. I'm going to give them about a 6-game victory. I'll say a series in 6 games. The other matchup, this is kind of an interesting one. On one hand, the Dallas Mavericks. Yes, I figured the Mavericks were going to beat the Oklahoma City Thunder, and they almost blew it in Game 7, or in Game 6. They almost went to Game 7, but got a fortunate break there in the end. And in the end, the Dallas Mavericks, with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, advancing to the Western Conference Finals. And their opponent, surprise, surprise, the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I'll tell you what, I am really impressed with the Timberwolves. I think right now you could say that Anthony Edwards is the best player in the NBA right now. And I think you can clearly say that, Karl Anthony Towns, another great player. I'm a little surprised. I really thought that Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets were going to be able to respond in Game 7, having a home court advantage on their place. But no, the Timberwolves just came back from a 3-2 deficit, and that series is really interesting. I mean, it was really surprising. You had Minnesota jumping out 2-0. Then you had Denver respond with 3 straight wins to go up 3-2. And after Game 5, Anthony Edwards apparently told some workers in the Denver arena, he said, "You guys are going to be working Game 7, you know that." And true to form, Minnesota won Game 6 at their place. And then in Game 7, they just took it right to him. So Minnesota able to fight back from losing 3 straight to winning 2 elimination games. And they are now in the Western Conference Finals to take on the Dallas Mavericks. And I got to tell you what, this is going to be a really interesting series. Because I think Minnesota has the best player on the court right now in Anthony Edwards. A lot of people are comparing him to Michael Jordan, but I think that's a bad comparison. But I also think the Dallas Mavericks could be the best team in the Western Conference. And I really hate to say that because as someone that's not a huge Dallas fan, I mean, you can't deny that Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are carrying the load for the Dallas Mavericks. And that should be a real interesting series. So, with that being said, it's a toss-up for me because I think both of them are capable of winning the West. But I think this will be another 7-game classic. Seeing Alex Rodriguez, who is now the owner of the Minnesota Timberwolves, really excited over that. I think this will be another classic 7-game series. And I think it'll come down to the wire. But I think I'm going with Minnesota in a bit of an upset to advance to the Western Conference Finals. And it's really hard to say, but I truly think whoever wins the West comes out of there with a championship. And again, Boston could be a big threat, but you just don't know. So with that being said, I'm picking Minnesota and Boston to advance to the NBA Finals, but I wouldn't be surprised if Dallas makes it to the NBA Finals. And then again, if Indiana continues to play the way they do, I think they could surprise a lot of people and make it to the finals. We could have Minnesota and Indiana, 2 teams that have yet to win a championship, looking for some pride and glory. So this should be a real exciting Western Conference Finals, or conference finals for both the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. So with that in mind, that is going to wrap things up here for my next episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to me to give my thoughts on movies and weather updates as well. We're going to try to bring more of that over time in future episodes, but also be talking more sports as well, and then just kind of things that are on my mind. So with that in mind, this is Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock. You can tune in to Spotify and also to my YouTube channel at KW Cline 91. So thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time on Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with